Sydney Sweeney is the clearest example of what happens when Hollywood mistakes marketability for talent. Her entire career, all her roles and marketing cycles, every breathless interview about her range is built on the same two big reasons. And let's not lie to ourselves pretending we don't know exactly what they are. It's not the performances drawing directors to her. It's not emotional depth. It's not versatility. It's the male gaze fantasy packaging the industry keeps recycling like a cheap brand template. Wide eyes, heavy breathing, clothes that are always a bit too tight, a camera that lingers a little too long, and a performance that gives you déjà vu because you've literally seen it a dozen times. Hollywood knows exactly what it's selling. The safest, oldest trick in the book: put a pretty girl in danger and hope the audience doesn't notice her acting sucks. She keeps getting these leading woman opportunities not because she's proven she can carry a movie, but because studios are banking on the aesthetic to override the absence of substance. And it never, ever works. The box office receipts keep proving the same point. You can't dress up one facial expression and call it a career. Her films flop, her shows stall, and every attempt to launch her as this transcendent superstar collapses because she never rises above surface-level panic. But Hollywood keeps throwing her roles anyway, desperate to manufacture a star, because she slots perfectly into the way the industry has always treated actresses. Ornamental first, talented second. While genuinely transformative actresses grind for years trying to earn a top spot, Sweeney keeps landing top billing by offering a performance toolkit no bigger than a tablespoon. Trembling hands, whisper shouting, watery eyes, repeat, repeat again, repeat in a new location. And the machine keeps running because she's built a brand around being looked at, not listened to. And why wouldn't she accept those roles? They don't challenge her. They don't require her to do anything except hit the same emotional beats she's been hitting since she first appeared on screen. Let's get into this already. Sydney Sweeney's time in the spotlight basically begins with Euphoria, and it's the clearest proof we have that Hollywood will mistake visibility for talent as long as you frame it correctly. Cassie is a role built to expose every insecurity, contradiction, and self-destructive impulse of a teenage girl whose entire sense of identity depends on being wanted. Sydney plays it like she's recording perfume ads between breakdowns. Doesn't take long to realize that she's using the same emotional palette. Tremble, whisper, stare into the void like you're waiting for direction, profit. The show rewards her for it. Sam Levinson built the entire visual language of her character around worshipping her body, turning Cassie into a cinematic thirst trap masquerading as tragedy. It's not that Sydney acts badly, it's that she barely acts at all, letting lighting, slow-motion shots, and glitter do the heavy lifting while she cycles through the same three expressions like she's stuck in a character creator menu. Her range is manufactured through editing. Her biggest emotional beats are defined by camera placement. The show bends over backwards to make her appear layered, but at its core, her portrayal is a glossy, over-directed loop of neediness and breathless whining. It's the equivalent of someone bringing a pure black canvas to a modern art gallery and insisting it's art. Euphoria made her a star because the industry realized you could dress her up in trauma and men would watch anything. Then you look at Everything Sucks, and you realize her trajectory was a blueprint. She plays Immaculate like she's acting out Tumblr mood boards in real time, switching personalities every 10 minutes because the script needs her to be whatever the scene demands. There's no internal logic, no emotional continuity, just whatever version of teenage desire looks best through a vintage lens. This show exposes the fundamental issue. Sydney struggles to build characters from the inside out. She builds them from the outside in, with facial expressions, with the suggestion of emotion rather than the embodiment of it. Everything she does feels pre-posed, like she's waiting for the shutter click. It's performance as Instagram Reels storytelling, acting by way of implication. And because she's undeniably photogenic, critics treated it as a promising start instead of the warning sign it actually was. By the time she lands sharp objects, the pattern is undeniable. She's placed in a cast where everyone else is disappearing into their trauma like they're being spiritually skinned alive on camera, and she shows up doing the exact same wide-eyed whisper routine she'll recycle for the next 5 years. Sydney plays it like she's auditioning for an A24 indie where her only direction was pretend your dog just died. Hopefully some of you understood that reference. She has these long, heavy, textured scenes with Amy Adams, who's a solid actress, but Sweeney makes her look like one of the greatest actresses alive by comparison. The emotional mismatch is just brutal. But because Sharp Objects is prestige TV, people projected nuance onto her. They saw her surrounded by great performances and assumed she was contributing to that greatness. In reality, she was just floating on the surface, letting the show's atmosphere do the talking. This was the moment Hollywood decided she needed roles that let audiences imagine she had versatility. Then comes The Voyeurs, the movie that turns all her weaknesses into the entire point of her character. Sydney plays this complex, morally conflicted, psychologically unraveling character like she's in a high-budget music video about infidelity. Every emotional turn is telegraphed, predictable, and shallow. Not because the script is thin, I mean it is, but that's not the problem, but because Sydney approaches every beat with the same blank, sensual confusion. She performs guilt like someone who knows she looks really attractive while crying. The movie relies on her body so heavily that the performance doesn't even need to exist. She just needs to be watched. I mean, the camera practically drools over her, and so does the narrative. This is the film where her entire career strategy becomes painfully obvious. She's being cast because men will watch anything as long as she's in it. And because the industry keeps rewarding that, she's never pushed to evolve. She just has to be present, breathing softly, looking slightly overwhelmed, and letting the camera pretend its depth. Reality was trying to be Sydney Sweeney's "see, she can actually act" moment. The performance her defenders cling to like a life raft. I'll give the writing a pass in this one, and what you get is essentially the same toolkit she uses everywhere else. Tremble, stutter, widen the eyes, breathe like she's trying not to hyperventilate, and let the discomfort of the situation do the emotional heavy lifting. Classic case of the material doing most of the work. Sydney plays tension the same way she plays sexuality in every other project. Externally, the directing and editing really try their damnedest to make it seem like she's giving a raw, devastating performance when really she's giving the same shallow affect she always gives, just in a different tone. Critics ate it up because the bar for attractive actresses doing real-world trauma dramas is embarrassingly low. It's industry charity disguised as critical praise. Nocturne is a psychological thriller built entirely around internal unraveling, obsession, insecurity, and the slow decay of ambition. It's a gift for an actress who can do introspection, who can communicate cracks forming beneath a perfect facade. But Sweeney approaches it with the same one-speed emotional palette she brings to everything else, flattening a character who desperately needed sharper edges and real volatility. Her Julianne is simply there, drifting from scene to scene with the same muted expressions she always defaults to, like she's reading the script synopsis from the storyboard guys instead of the dialogue. The film needs someone who can portray genius warped by envy, but Sweeney never sells the idea that anything is burning under the surface. It's passive when it should be dangerous, small when it should feel unstable. And the irony is that Nocturne bends over backwards to frame her as this haunted, prodigious artist, but none of it sticks because she never actually transforms. It's the same Sweeney performance in a different costume, relying entirely on moody lighting and atmosphere to suggest emotional depth she doesn't provide. Clementine exposes that even further. There's no unpredictability, no authentic heat, no psychological layering. Even in her quiet moments, where tension should simmer, she defaults to that distant, hollow-eye look she's made a career out of. The look that's supposed to imply vulnerability or danger, but ends up meaning nothing because she uses it for everything. She never generates the gravity needed for the narrative to make sense. And because the entire emotional axis of Clementine depends on her ability to captivate, to destabilize, to pull the audience into her orbit, the whole movie collapses around her. It becomes clearer than ever that when she isn't being edited or styled into fascination, she can't create it on her own. The performance is as thin as tracing paper stretched over a story that needed someone capable of actually living in the role, not just posing through it. Anyone But You comes along and exposes the exact problem people keep trying to deny. Romantic comedies live and die on chemistry, real chemistry, the kind actors conjure out of timing, charisma, presence, and emotional intelligence. Sydney Sweeney shows up to this movie like she's the designated hot girl at a table read. Everything she does feels like she's 5 seconds behind her own scenes. Her banter feels workshopped. Her comedic timing hits like someone reading jokes translated by Google. She performs romance like it's a favor she's doing for the audience. The Sydney Sweeney vehicle that would give her box office credibility. The real issue is that she's not compelling to watch when she has to act instead of simply being looked at, when she has to create chemistry instead of benefit from male characters projecting it onto her, when she's no longer framed by neon lighting and trauma or voyeuristic camera angles designed to elevate her appealing features. And then, like a cosmic joke delivered by the film gods themselves, came Madame Web. The film that managed to take one of the most chaotic actresses working today and place her in a project so catastrophically bad that every failing was magnified like a tumor under a microscope. Sydney's performance in this movie is the closest thing to existential comedy I've ever seen. Not intentionally, but in the sense that she's so miscast, so tonally lost, so blatantly uninterested, that watching her deliver lines feels like watching a hostage blink Morse code. Her character exists for two reasons: to be looked at, and to inexplicably ask Dakota Johnson questions that require absolutely zero acting skill to answer. She's not even that bad in this one, she's just irrelevant. The movie treats her like a prop that talks. Her line readings feel like she learned them 5 minutes before shooting, and her emotional responses are so disconnected from the tone of the scene that she might as well have been shot on a different set weeks later and composited in. Then comes Immaculate, which the internet desperately tried to spin as her prestige horror arrival. Behind-the-scenes prayer candles, fan accounts screaming about how this would prove the haters wrong. And when the movie finally arrives, what do we get? Sydney Sweeney in nunsploitation cosplay as if it's fucking Halloween, performing fear the same way she performs sadness, desire, or anger, from the throat outward. Horror requires internal unraveling. Horror requires the audience to feel what the actor feels. Sydney performs fear like she's posing for a Vogue editorial puff piece about overcoming her fears of being an actor or something. Her breakdowns feel like deleted Euphoria scenes with different wardrobe. The movie tries to sell her as a tortured vessel of religious dread, but she plays everything with the same emotional modulation. Look helpless. Breathe shakily. Widen the eyes. Call it a day. If I'm beginning to sound repetitive to you, that's kind of the point I'm making. All this movie does is underline that she only shines when the camera objectifies her, because without the male gaze manufacturing depth around her, she has nothing left to lean on. Americana is one of those films that just disappeared into the cinematic void. So much so that most people don't even realize Sydney Sweeney was in it, which should already tell you everything about its cultural footprint. This was one of four, count 'em up, 4 movies with her as the leading actress that flopped this year. It was a festival to limited release ghost that made basically no money, had no marketing, and left absolutely zero impact on her career or anyone else's. And Sweeney's performance in it feels exactly like that trajectory, a hollow placeholder presence where she's technically acting, in the sense that she's standing in the correct spot and saying the correct lines. But there's no internal life, no tension, no character being lived. She plays Penny Joe, a drifting, wounded outlaw type, with the same shtick she uses in every genre, vaguely sad, vaguely seductive, vaguely empty. It's like she's waiting for direction that never comes, and eventually decides to just coast through the entire movie on default mode. She shrinks into the background, overshadowed by every supporting character, playing it like a perfume commercial shot in the desert. A performance held together by dust, lip gloss, and the hope that looking intense is the same thing as being intense. It's not. When people talk about her career being built more on appeal and hype than on actual performance depth, Americana is Exhibit A film that got an empty outline of a character delivered with the energy of someone mentally on a different set in a different movie, thinking about a different paycheck. Eden is the perfect note to leave it on. Another flop with her name attached to it. It was marketed as this gritty, psychological survival thriller set on a remote island with cult dynamics, betrayal, and escalating desperation. But Sweeney's presence in it is so faint, you'd swear she was acting through a fog machine. She plays the vulnerable, emotionally fractured runaway trying to reclaim her sense of self archetype. But she brings nothing new, nothing surprising, nothing remotely believable to the role. Sweeney gives it the emotional equivalent of someone who's mildly annoyed. Their phone battery is at 3%. And by the time the story finally reaches the darker twists it thinks it's earned, Sweeney's performance has done nothing to support them. Eden ends up feeling like a movie held together by vibes and sand, with a lead actress who looks spiritually absent. And that's the real problem. Sydney Sweeney's career is built on framing. Directors use her beauty as a narrative shortcut, letting audiences project complexity onto performances that, when actually dissected, have the emotional depth of a TikTok acting challenge. Hollywood keeps handing her major roles because she sells an image, the perfect combination of vulnerability and sexual availability that the industry still can't admit it's addicted to. She's being cast because her limitations don't threaten the gaze that built her, and until she's pushed into a role that demands real interiority, we'll keep getting the same hollow, prepackaged performances dressed up as range, simply because the camera likes looking at her. And I'll admit I do too. The industry doesn't reward her talent, it rewards her usefulness. I don't know how many of these dramas I can watch where nothing fucking happens before I go insane, but this is what the people needed, to say something that everybody is too scared to admit. Well, thank God that's finally over. I think it's time for me, hell, for the both of us to cleanse our palate with something more refined.